Welcome to the Week 6 Mid-State Football Preview. I'm Perry Mattern alongside Jake Adams of the Sentinel, and we have finished our football tab. Now let's talk about what is in that football tab. You could pick that up on newsstands tomorrow. Let's start out with our quick snaps, and then we will get to our 3 key games of the week. As always, we start with the quick snaps, taking a look around some of the games in the area. Let's start at Northern, where Big Spring and Northern will get started at 7 o'clock in Dillsburg. And Jake, the Bulldogs, 2-0, have lost 3 in a row, and Northern has gotten to a 2-3 record in a slightly different fashion, but both of these teams could use a big divisional win.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's probably safe to say that this game isn't going to end up being isn't going to help them in the division race. East Penn, Greencastle are running away with it right now, but this is for kind of who's going to follow up in that second tier. Big Spring still has a lot to offer. They got to get that offense moving again, though. It's really stalled in the past couple games. Northern is sitting there, still wondering what's going to happen with them. Are they for real? Or are they not? And they got a chance here if they can beat Big Spring to put themselves up in that second tier easily.
Right. The Polar Bears, good win 2 weeks ago over James Buchanan, and then last week struggled against Waynesboro. Speaking of James Buchanan, Big Spring coming off an 11-point loss to the Rockets. Moving on to Palmeria, Boiling Springs will be there to take on the Cougars, and the Bubblers riding a 3-game winning streak. They're 2-0 in the Mid-Penn capital.
Yeah, who would have seen that coming after the way they started things out? We were talking about a little bit ago, just the difference that they're kind of the exception to that pass-happy division there. But it works for them. That wing tee has been their staple for a long time, but they're going up against a Palmeria team that likes to throw it. Got to see what the Boiling Springs defense can do in this situation. They have been pretty good against the passing game, but Palmeria is one of the better teams they're going to face in terms of airing it out.
Speaking of the pass-happy Mid-Penn capital teams, West Perry at Trinity. Both of these teams like to air it out a good bit, and Mustangs still looking for that first win. And meanwhile, with Trinity, we still really haven't been able to figure out what they are. A good win over Palmeria, and then a very good win earlier in the year over DeLone Catholic. But last week, they were just blown out by Boiling Springs.
Yeah, I guess it had something to do with size. Didn't get a chance to see that game, but the Boiling Springs blew them off the line, it looked like, looking over the stats and everything. It's got to be good for them to go into this game because West Perry's defense has not been good at all. West Perry, this is the last team they probably want to face right now with all the questions that they have. Trinity can throw it whenever they want to. They also have a pretty decent running game. So if the Shamrocks are looking for a bounce-back game to get back to 500, this is what they're looking for.
And you would have to think that they get it, but West Perry, you're waiting for them to possibly break out offensively, especially behind Chris Lehman at quarterback. Moving on to Camp Hill at Steel High. Camp Hill, a tough loss last week to Milton Hershey, 25-23. Steel High is a team that hung with Milton Hershey, took them to overtime, so we could be in for another good game.
Yeah, don't let the records fool you at all. Steel High sitting at, was it 2-3?
1-4.
1-4. But Camp Hill's game against Milton Hershey showed that a lot of those first few big wins were definitely against weaker competition. Right. Not to say that Camp Hill isn't good, it's just the 4-0 start was a little deceiving. This will be a nice game for the Lions to prove whether or not they can bounce back from that kind of game. It's not surprising they lost to Milton Hershey, but now it's time. All right, you've taken the bullet here. Now it's time to bounce back from it.
East Pennsboro goes on the road to take on James Buchanan, and for East Pennsboro, Jake, the Panthers are the favorite in this division.
Yep.
They got a big win last week over Greencastle. Everyone knows that. Now this is the kind of game. This is a classic trap game. Going on the road to James Buchanan, a team that has not been historically good. You would hope that Todd Studer's crew comes out with a big first quarter.
And James Buchanan's coming off a 4-6 season, and there's been a lot of talk going into the year. Is this the year they finally get above 500 for the first time in 15, 20 years, basically? Right. So this is the situation where if you're the Rockets coach, you really sit there and point at this game right now all week. You know, this is what we want to do. This is who we want to be. If we can knock off the best team in the division right now, just how much it will speak for that program. So East Pennsboro's really got to watch that they don't fall for this game because the Rockets definitely have some things to offer. Their offense isn't as elite as East Pennsboro. Neither is the defense, but they're good enough that if East Pennsboro doesn't bring its A game, they could lose.
Rockets certainly have weapons there on the offensive side. Seth Carball along with Shamar Paynes running the ball, and then Peter Huey is pretty effective on the outside. Shippensburg at Waynesboro, the Greyhounds have struggled big time. They've lost the last couple games really rather handily to East Pennsboro and then to Mechanicsburg last week. So I think they have to be welcoming a Waynesboro team that is not maybe as good as East Pennsboro Mechanicsburg, but the Indians can put points on the board.
Yeah, but at the same time, they've got Connor Fedorov to go against at quarterback, and they just got exposed a little bit by Mechanicsburg, last week, 2 weeks ago. And this defense we've talked about before is they're good, but they never get off the field, so the yards keep stacking up, and it looks like they're starting to tire now. Connor Fedorov's coming in with 1,200 yards passing on the season. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the state numbers-wise. For Shippensburg, they're going to have an elite game on defense to stay with us because this offense isn't going to keep up with those kind of points.
And you have to hope that the Greyhounds' offense also kicks into gear.
Yep.
If they can get that running game going, maybe able to control the clock by keeping the ball on the ground on the offensive side. Let's move on to our three key games. Starting out at West Shore Stadium, Mechanicsburg at Cedar Cliff. And the Wildcats get a win last week against Shippensburg. And Cedar Cliff has been improving week by week and really capped off their first half of the season with a big 27-7 win over Lower Dauphin. And if you want to go find some points, want to see some people throw the ball, West Shore Stadium is your place to go.
Oh, I don't know if they're going to be throwing it too much this
well,
week.
Maybe not Cedar Cliff, but at least Mechanicsburg will air it out a bit.
Yeah, that's true. We got Jaden Demi and Mechanicsburg can run the ball too.
Shaheem Brown.
So we could have 300 yards passing, we could have 300 yards rushing.
Well, see, that's the thing about these two teams. The offenses are extremely balanced. And last week, Cedar Cliff was very run heavy because it worked. Jaden Demi was so effective. But for Mechanicsburg, this is the kind of game that they got to have. And I wrote about this in our columns. You wrote about the Colonial a bit. I wrote about the Keystone. And for Mechanicsburg, a team last year that just missed the district playoffs, literally by 3/100ths of a point, missing the District 3 Quad A playoffs. Now this year they're back down to AAA, which would help their cause. But when you look at the schedule, they're 2-3, and their next three games are Cedar Cliff, Redland, and Lower Dauphin. They're going to have to take one of these three games.
Yeah, it's going to help them in terms of the power rankings to face these three teams.
Right.
A win is a huge boost, obviously. The thing I think that's not getting enough talk right now is Cedar Cliff's defense has been outstanding of late. Look at the teams they've gone up against. They beat Lower Dauphin a week ago. They lost to Penn Manor in week 1. Both of those teams are elite teams in District 3 AAA.
And they held them well. Penn Manor was under 30, and then last week Lower Dauphin to 7.
Yeah, and Lower Dauphin's offense is one of the best in the Mid-Penn. You look at what they've done, it's made the offense's job easier, but yet it's Jaden Demi and Grant Brenneman who get all the talk, and deservedly so with the numbers they're putting up. And Grant Brenneman right now has had 2 back-to-back games with a 75% completion percentage. Then again, he hasn't had to throw much.
And Demi has made his job a lot easier, certainly. Speaking of the Lower Dauphin Falcons, you have to believe this is a big bounce-back game for them. They were embarrassed last week on their home turf. Now they're going to play on their home turf again and welcome Redland. Redland 5-0. Last week struggled with Susquehanna Township, who is winless.
Yes.
And you don't like to see that the Patriots struggled as much as they did. Now Susquehanna Township in their own right is not as bad as that 0-5 record indicates. But Redland is going to have their hands full here. And maybe we find out if they're for real.
Yeah.
I think this is where you really find out if the Patriots are for real. There's no slight against them, but their first 2 Keystone games, Hershey and Susquehanna Township, the 2 worst teams in the division.
They've got Cedar Cliff coming up. They've got Bishop McDevitt coming up.
Mechanicsburg,
right? Doesn't get easier from here on out. And this is, like you said, a good game. They've been challenged to Susquehanna. That 0-5 record and what their ranking is in AAA is so low. Right. I looked at going into last week. It was just. They were, I think, 5th from the bottom, and it just didn't seem right with who they had gone up against. Right. So it wasn't a surprise that they gave them a challenge. Now, is it a surprise they gave them that much of a challenge? Maybe. But Redland, yes, this week, this is where we get to see, do they deserve to be at the top of this division with the Lower Dolphins, the Cedar Cliffs, and the Bishop McDevitts? They can come out with this road win. That could be huge momentum for them.
Right, there's no doubt about it. And you mentioned that McDevitt and Cedar Cliff, they get those back-to-back at the end of the year. So if they continue to win, the talk becomes more and more of what this team is. And I think we had the same question for Cedar Cliff last week. Are they for real? And they went and beat Lower Dauphin.
Yes.
So now Redland's got the same exact
question. And it will be fun if they win this game and keep going, because that Redland Cedar Cliff
the Redland Cedar Cliff game, if we could fast forward to week 10 and play that one right now.
That could be one of the best games of the year.
No
it could mean the most out of almost every game we see.
And the nice thing about it is those two teams are both going to the district playoffs,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a fun one. Well, let's get to our game of the week this week and not talk about game of the week that is at the end of this month. At the end of this week, it'll be Carlisle at Cumberland Valley. And this is a matchup that it's odd because Cumberland Valley maybe doesn't see Carlisle as a rival.
Mm-hmm.
Carlisle sees Cumberland Valley as a rival. But the reason that the Eagles maybe don't see the Herd as a rival is they've won 25 of the last 27 meetings. I mean, unbelievable dominance back to the 1980s. And the last time Carlisle beat Cumberland Valley was a playoff meeting in 2004. But we know after what we've seen, Carlisle certainly is good enough to beat the Eagles this year.
The question I had coming off of the Mifflin County win last week is, okay, State College is, from all accounts, better than expected. Their defense is one of the best in this division, if not the Mid-Penn. Can Carlisle hold up against those better defenses? CV certainly is one of the best defenses out there. So here's, again, a challenge. If you're Carlisle, if you're CV, you're looking at the past 10 years, the last time Carlisle won this game was in district playoffs. Carlisle beat CV in an upset. That's got to sit there and kind of, the teams don't want to look back at history, but this becomes, for the first time since basically then, that Carlisle looks like they have a shot to actually win this game.
Right, and that's the exciting part. We got to talk with Carlisle head coach Josh Oswalt and see what he had to say leading up to this game.
The big game as far as it goes for us. These guys are right down the road from us. They've had our number for the longest time, and in order for us to solidify a spot in our conference, in our district, we need to beat teams like this. It takes a focused, disciplined week, and we have to get after it.
I think everyone knows about your offense, what you've been able to do offensively, scoring the ball with multiple different weapons, but the defense was very good last week, and now they get a team that has been struggling defensively, or struggling offensively, I should say, but a team that your defense will have to be very disciplined against.
Yeah, the wing tee is tough to defend against, but the wing tee from Cumberland Valley is even more difficult because they're very disciplined. The offensive line runs their tracks well, and they just clean you out. So you need to have gap control defense, and you need to fly to the ball and have it. And their running backs are tough. Not one guy's going to bring them down. They're going to carry the load.
You as a coach and as this program has clearly made steps in the right direction, what would this mean to get a win over a school like Cumberland Valley on Friday?
It would be great. I mean, this is something we've been working towards. It's not so much just beating Cumberland Valley this week. It's more, earning that fourth victory in the week 6, and, being 4-2 going into week 7, and really being in the hunt for the playoffs. And we're not just talking squeaking out, 16 seed. We're looking for, top 5, top 8. We know what we're capable of, and a win this weekend will continue to keep the ball rolling, and keep this season as successful as it's been, and continue to keep it successful.
Thank you to Coach Oswalt for taking time out to talk with us this week. And as the Herd get prepared for Cumberland Valley, right before we went to Coach Oswalt, talked about the fact that this is maybe the first time they have the chance to beat Cumberland Valley, and certainly the matchup, as we were already talking about, the Carlisle offense and the Cumberland Valley defense, is the highlight matchup. But let's flip it around. The Cumberland Valley offense has struggled.
Yeah.
It really did. They were shut out last week by CD East, and the Carlisle defense, we aren't really totally sure what to expect from them.
Mifflin County last week, they blew up almost every play it seemed. I was at that game, and it just looked like they were constantly in the backfield, whether it was passing, running, it didn't matter. But this team is undersized, which isn't a surprise given how both programs are. Up front, Cumberland Valley on both sides of the ball even has the advantage in terms of just sheer manpower, brute force. Carlisle has been preaching, Josh Oswalt has been preaching gap assignment, controlling the lanes, everything like that. Carlisle is going to need to play its best game on defense if they want to come out with a win here, because they have the opportunity to get blown out of the water here. Just CV's run game has been steady, but I wouldn't say they're explosive.
Right, not explosive, and the Thundering Herd are certainly going to have to say disciplined, the big word there, as they face this Cumberland Valley, wing tee attack. Well, that does it for our Mid-State football preview this week. Make sure you check out the football tab in Friday's paper. We'll see you on Monday for our Week 6 recap.